Let's get started. Yay, thank you. First talk in the morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Dan Sanderson. I'm here to talk about the MEGA65, which is the computer that you're seeing up there. The MEGA65 is a modern recreation of the Commodore 65, an unreleased computer from Commodore that was meant to be a successor to the Commodore 64 and 128. I'm going to focus this talk on something I've been working on for the last 3 years, a newsletter that I've been doing every month about the MEGA65 and the community around it, supporting the community by promoting its projects and also writing feature articles introducing people to the machine. I'm going to talk a lot about the feature articles in particular. There's going to be a series of 36 lightning talks over the next hour, so you'll get a sense of what it's like to program the MEGA65. And it'll just be sort of a mishmash of things, and if there's time, we'll take questions later. This won't be a complete tutorial or anything, so don't bother paying too close attention, but the articles are there online if you want to read them. This is the Commodore 65 as a photo. Somebody posted it to eBay when they were selling theirs. They tend to sell for about $30,000 because they were never released. We know about them because Commodore had prototypes made, possibly only a couple of hundred, but I know there are people in this building that own one or two, so they're out there. And but they are pretty rare, and you do get a sense of how far they got just before they were about to release. They canceled the project like months, literally months before they were going to start releasing them. So this is how we know what they look like and how they're supposed to work. We also have documentation about the history of the project and stuff like that. This was meant to be released around 1989 or so, but it got delayed. So that's basically why they canceled it. They missed their market opportunity. Tended to be, one more model in line with Commodore 64 compatibility. That was a major feature of the Commodore 128, obviously, and the Commodore 64 by the late 80s had been very well established with a very strong software ecosystem. So they felt it was important to have backwards compatibility in there. They made some really interesting technical choices for the Commodore 65 in the architecture. I won't have a lot of time to go into those details, but I'll try to throw them in as we can. The Commodore 65 had a new CPU that was 6502 backwards compatible, somewhat. So the 4502, which they bundled in a system on a chip for the 4510 in the machine, had all the same documented opcodes as the 6502, but the undocumented opcodes of the 6502 were replaced. They added new features to the CPU, so they needed to reclaim those opcodes, and that made it difficult to be compatible because there was some software that relied on the undocumented opcodes of the 6502. So that was one of the challenges. Timing was also a major issue. They actually made the 4502 more efficient than the 6502, and that introduced compatibility issues, like some of the opcodes, some of the instructions were faster than they were supposed to be for 6502 compatibility. The CPU itself ran at 3.5 megahertz as opposed to just 1 megahertz, so there was some extra speed there as well. They expanded the RAM up to 128K. They were going to launch with 128K, and then it was expandable up to multiple megabytes. So they had a banking mechanism for accessing extra memory beyond 64K. And they included in that memory space a sizable ROM, so being able to grow the kernel and the BASIC to add many more features was a really powerful idea. This included the Commodore 64 ROM, of course, because they wanted it to be backwards compatible with the C64, so it could switch into a C64 mode and run the C64 kernel on the same hardware, the same architecture as the Commodore 65. The Commodore 64, of course, you remember, has the VIC-2 video chip. They were going to go with the VIC-3 video chip in the Commodore 65 with some extra features, and we will get to talk about a couple of those today. The SID chip, the audio chip in the Commodore 64, stayed the same, but they were going to give them two SID chips in the Commodore 65 for a total of 6 voices. One of the more powerful features of the Commodore 65 was going to be, or is, I guess, the DMA. There's a chip in there that's just about copying memory around. Very powerful feature of architecture at the time. And of course, a much upgraded BASIC. BASIC 10 is what they were up to by that point. As you can see from the photo, it did have a built-in 1581 floppy drive, 3.5 inch. and Commodore 64 style peripheral ports. For some reason, they went with a +4 style cartridge port, which is an interesting choice given the emphasis on Commodore 64 compatibility. I guess you were meant to use an adapter to use Commodore 64 cartridges with the original Commodore 65. They also had a plan for a new kind of external 3.5-inch floppy drive with a faster connection to the machine. So the MEGA65 is a project that is celebrating its 10-year anniversary this year from the inception of the project. Yep, round of applause for the MEGA65 team. As I say, it's a recreation of the Commodore 65. The goal is to basically just finish what Commodore started, or at least in spirit. So picking up where they left off, giving this piece of history that nobody got to experience to the world and making it accessible to people. As a new platform, it's new to a lot of us, but it is also deeply rooted in history. As much of it as possible is open source. So the schematic for the main board, it is FPGA based, so the FPGA core is all open source. It is based on the Commodore 65 kernel, and so that is licensed code that we can't open source, and we can't open source our modifications and fixes to it either, but that's a component that you can get at no charge if you were building any one of these. The FPGA based internals means that it's a highly upgradable machine, which we've definitely taken advantage of as we work on the chipset that is implemented in the FPGA as both a recreation of the Commodore 65 chipset and this new idea of a MEGA65 chipset. Everyone who owns a MEGA65 can get new versions of the chipset because it is FPGA based. You just install new firmware and you get an all new chipset. And we'll see in a moment that that's useful for other things as well. And of course, there are modern hardware conveniences, HDMI video, an Ethernet jack, a couple other things. Important to bring this into a modern context. If we only shipped something that was identical to the C65 prototype, it would have a limited lifespan because it was already a computer of the late 80s, early 90s. And we did license the C65 ROM. There's also a licensed version of GEOS for the MEGA65 that is included with the machine. So just to compare the specs real quick, we actually call our CPU a little bit different, 45G SO2, because we do have control over the chipset. Couldn't resist adding a few more features, especially to make the extra memory easier to access. The main features we added are all memory access features. And with an extended instruction set as well. It's pretty clever the way we've done it actually, but most of the new CPU features are original to the 4502 intended by Commodore. Ours is also multi-speed, so for Commodore 64 compatibility, it can run at 1 megahertz. For C65 compatibility, 3.54 megahertz, and you can also run it at 40 megahertz. This is actually a huge feature, I think, especially when we talk about BASIC. We'll talk about BASIC in a moment. BASIC at 40 megahertz is a game changer. It makes it so much easier to use BASIC for powerful things, and you basically don't have to worry about speed for some important things. Now, there are still limits. It's still BASIC, and you'd encounter that, but you can do arcade quality games. You can get an entire frame's worth of code in a single frame if you're used to, if you know about like game programming and stuff and coding to the speed of the display refresh. You can actually get some sizable logic in at 40 megahertz. We actually bundle a bunch of memory, 384 kilobytes of RAM, and a section of upper memory that we call attic RAM that's 8 megabytes, really useful for programs that just need to like throw something somewhere. They just keep it somewhere, not quite like a RAM drive or anything, but it's just like an extra region of memory in upper memory. We call our video chip the VIC-4, and we do have some really powerful new features that we added to the video to make it more capable and more interesting to a modern audience. One of the driving forces behind our improvements, because we could just go nuts, right? Like we could just make this a modern computer and then nobody would be interested, right? That we want to keep this rooted in history. And so the guideline we use is that we only add things that would be era appropriate. Even if they weren't necessarily intended for the Commodore 65, they could still be found in computers of the late 80s and early 90s. So we'll see a little bit of that today in some of the examples. We added 4 SID chips instead of 2 because we could. We also do some digital audio. We have 4 digital audio channels as well for sound sample playback. We extended the DMA. The DMA programming model is actually much easier to use on the MEGA65. If you've done any programming on a computer that has a DMA, it's like a separate chip, and you sort of have to call out to it and then wait for it to be done with its stuff and all this other stuff. Our DMA is in line with the CPU, so it's like a single CPU instruction to copy huge amounts of memory one place or the other. It makes it much easier to reason about and think about, and it seems like that would like interfere with the ability to parallelize tasks or whatever. But it's just so fast, it just works. It's a great trade-off. It makes it really easy to program. We, of course, couldn't resist adding a few things to the BASIC as well. Really just a few minor quality of life improvements and a few things that access some of the additional features of the MEGA65 hardware. For the most part, BASIC 65 is very similar to BASIC 10 and falls somewhere in between the Commodore 65 and the MEGA65 in terms of its capability. We also include the built-in floppy drive. The plastic case, I do encourage everyone to stop by the exhibit and actually see this thing. It's got a really high quality plastic case, modern mechanical key switches. It's a joy to type on. As I mentioned, it's HDMI and VGA video out. There's a stereo output jack, modern power connectivity, things like that, so you're not worried about vintage power supplies. The usual peripheral ports, and modern storage, clearly important. Not everybody has floppy disks or wants to manage with those. So we have an SD card. We actually have two SD card slots, one inside the machine so you can pretend it's a hard drive, and an external one if you want to like take it out and move it to your PC every once in a while. So it supports D81 disk images as well as regular floppy disks. Just on that SD card, you can have a huge library of disks and use them as much as you want. There is an IEC serial port on there, so if you want to connect vintage disk drives, you can. And we just went with the Commodore 64 style cartridge port just to make it easy on people. There's no point in recreating that design decision if nobody wants to use it. We do have an Ethernet jack as well, and this is really useful for file transfer between your PC and the MEGA65. I just keep my MEGA65 connected to my home network, and I just copy files back and forth, and it's really easy. We actually have another hardware project for an expansion port. You'll see some of on that photo there, some of the holes don't have their punch outs fully punched out yet. And there's a project to complete that. So the main board is actually pretty small, and we can add the remaining ports, including the user port, a dataset port if you really want a dataset port. The C65 wasn't going to have one, but obviously for Commodore 64 compatibility, that's useful. A composite video is also planned, that kind of thing, to sort of complete the picture. So a little bit about me. I've been on the project since May 2022. That's when I first received my MEGA65. This was in the first batch. That's when most people receive their first production model MEGA65. I'm a member of the MEGA65 steering committee. I'm the lead for the manual, the documentation, and the ROM. It's been a real joy to work with vintage Commodore assembly language source code on their operating system and help fix bugs and track things down and meet the needs of the community as part of the ROM and the BASIC. And the subject of today's talk is the digest. I call it Dan's MEGA65 Digest, as a newsletter that you can subscribe to by email or RSS. I also do a read aloud podcast, which I never would have imagined anyone would want to hear me read aloud a bunch of technical material about the MEGA65, but people seem to like it, and I like doing it, so you can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm going to talk a lot about my own work today for the next half hour or so, but I do want to acknowledge that the MEGA65 was a group project. It was like a lot of people were involved, lots of really talented people. Long before I got there, people have been working on the MEGA65 and really making it what it is. Not just the core team, there were partners, the steering committee that I mentioned, but also the community at large. Everything that everyone does on the MEGA65 and shares out becomes a part of the MEGA65 and a part of the community and a part of the experience for everybody. And so one of the things I really want to do with the newsletter is promote that and bring that forward and share that with other people. So every digest starts with a section of news that talks about other people's contributions. I started this newsletter when I noticed that there was a communication gap between the project and the rest of the world. They didn't really have a newsletter or even a mailing list at the time. I think they did have a collection of email addresses they collected to sort of announce when they launched or whatever, but they weren't using it to really promote on a regular basis things that the community was doing or even project status. In particular, our business relationship with our distributor prevented us from having access to the list of people who pre-ordered the machine. So in the early days when we were collecting pre-orders, we didn't have a relationship with those people until they found us on our Discord or in forums or things like that. So we could not email people and tell them about what was going on with the project. This was especially hazardous in the early days of the project when we started to encounter supply chain issues that delayed pre-orders. And lots of people who pre-ordered were like waiting for status updates and were not hearing anything about it. I tried my best to reach these people by starting a newsletter and just having something that people might hear about if they went looking for it, but I could not actually access them directly. So it was a way of having to like rebuild the community, rebuild the audience, just so that we could reach them and with announcements and shipping updates and things like that. We also wanted to reach people that were interested in the project but didn't actually make a purchase yet. Like, that's important too. We wanted people to see that there's activity in the community and there's progress on the project and stuff like that. It was really hard to find this stuff. I put my name in the title of the thing to make it less official, and at the time, it was mostly just I didn't feel comfortable representing the project or the community as a whole. I wanted it to be sort of my own thing to make it clear that if there were any mistakes or missteps or something, that I owned those mistakes and they weren't part of the official team or whatever. But this quickly became the official newsletter of the project. So I feel a little bit self-conscious now that my name is in it. It really should just be called the MEGA65 Digest, but it's it's my own blog, I guess. I'm sort of my own programming articles and things that I'm writing as well as to promote the community and activity and news. I started this to sort of pump energy into the community also. Like, we were still bootstrapping the community at the time. So yeah, people would do a few things a month or whatever, but we needed to like share that out and then also like encourage other people to participate. And so I wanted something that would encourage people to give them the information and the motivation they needed to actually turn on the machine and play with it and see what it could do. So community news was a major focus. Project announcements was really important at the time because there was a lot in flux. And then these feature articles were meant to give people the information they needed. The digest was meant to be highly interactive. As soon as you got it, there was instructions for you to try something interesting that you could play with. It's just a few commands you could type in, a short program, a concept you could play with. And even if you didn't use your MEGA65 for anything else, you could turn it on once a month and play with it for 20 minutes and get something out of it. That was really important to me that was like a focus of this newsletter. It's been monthly for 3 years now, over 36 issues, over 150,000 words. It's been a real treat to really generate a lot of new material for it. I do want to fold some of this back into the official documentation at some point, but for now it's just out there in sort of casual form that you can read at your leisure. This outward communication part is really important, especially from a search engine optimization standpoint. Another thing that I noticed is a lot of our community resources were not accessible by search engines. So if you wanted to go to Google or a search engine and find out information about the MEGA65, you were not actually going to find our official resources. Our documentation was in PDF form in some weird download space that search engines were not reaching. Our forum was mostly Discord, which is hidden from the entire internet, right? So I wanted like a bunch of material that was out there that was easy for search engines to find so that people can find it that way. Of course, in a modern context, I think generative AI crawling this information, ingesting it, and being able to answer questions accurately about the MEGA65 is also important. So community projects, a lot of them, especially software, we do have this really cool website called FileHost. We call it FileHost, where anyone can just post their stuff. If you just want to release some software, a little program you've written or a big program you've written or something like that, you can upload it where everyone can find it, everyone can see it and link to it and comment on it and rate it and all that other fun stuff. In the digest, I made sure to announce people's projects and echo people's announcements when they're ready to share their work. I wanted to add it so whenever something was uploaded to FileHost or posted to the announcements channel in our Discord, I would echo those announcements and put them in the digest as well. So I have a section called Featured Files where I talk about things that people have uploaded. I don't really get to everybody when I do this, and I feel kind of bad about that. There's only so much space, but when people are excited about promoting their project, I do that. I do hold back if it's like a work in progress and they don't want to like support users or anything like that. I kind of wait for people to tell me when they're ready for their project to get more attention. I also created this Mastodon bot that posts whenever something is uploaded to FileHost. So it's a way of following FileHost and see what happens. The bot has posted 718 times since I started it. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, games is really huge. Demos, people just try different things with the machine and put together graphical effects or music or anything like that. People love to build tools. I think when we get started in a new platform, we say, okay, well, I need some tools to help me use this. And so there's like lots of programming tools, even all new programming environments that people are making. One of the things we do that I can't take credit for, but the team does, especially Gertja on our team, maintains these intro discs, which we actually bundle on with the machine on an SD card that includes, I think, a couple of hundred things that people have made for the MEGA65 come pre-bundled. So you can just like start using it right away. And they have these really cool menu systems that you can use to browse it. There's articles and other things in there that you run and read directly on the machine. And a lot of this doesn't even count stuff that happened before I joined. Like there was before they launched the production unit, they had developer kits. You can see a developer kit out on the table there as well in the exhibit. And other ways for people to play. There's an emulator that you can download and try, and people were making software for this thing before there was even a production machine ready. The FPGA leaves for one more really cool possibility, which is you can have alternate computers. You can have alternate chipsets running on the machine. It is an FPGA platform at its base, and then there's a MEGA65 platform that runs as an FPGA core. But you can also run a Commodore 64 core. There's a really good Commodore 64 core that's very capable, and this is especially useful with the MEGA65's Commodore-layout keyboard. If you've ever played with a MiSTer or an emulator or something like that using a PC keyboard, you have to like remember how these things are mapped to the Commodore keyboard. But the MEGA65 gives you a complete Commodore experience with that keyboard, as well as all the connectivity with the disk drives and stuff like that. We also have a Commodore PET core, we have a VIC-20 core as well. I would love to see this be a complete Commodore museum at some point with every Commodore 8-bit running on the MEGA65, or you can just download it and just switch between them as you need them. These cores, especially the MiSTer community, has really put a lot of effort into highly accurate FPGA cores for recreating vintage machines. But we have some other cool ones too. Someone made a TI-99-4A core. There's a Spectrum Next core, Game Boy Advance core, stuff like that. There's like one person that loves to port arcade cores. So like arcade games run directly on this thing with their original chipset. Those are really cool. We've got 19 of those so far. So if you really like arcade games, you can do that as well. So BASIC is a huge draw. I love to watch people play with BASIC on this machine. It's much more featureful than the Commodore 64 BASIC, which, you have to think about it in context, I guess, that the fundamentals of the language were always there from the very beginning. As a language, it's fine. But of course, the Commodore 64 insisted that you manipulate hardware registers directly to do stuff, graphics, sound, joystick input, that kind of thing. And so over the years, Commodore added more features that were commensurate with the platforms that they were running on, Commodore Plus4 and 128 and so forth. Commodore 65 was meant to have BASIC 10, which added more features, specifically its graphics features. The Commodore 65 had a bit-plane graphics system that was really powerful and easy to use. And so there's a huge library of functions and commands for that. We picked up the Commodore 65 ROM, and it was mostly complete, but there was bugs and incomplete features. There's some really cool design docs you can find online from that original era, from that original team, saying to be determined, not yet finished, and so on and so forth. And so we went through all of that and tried to make decisions and finish things in the original spirit. We ended up contributing, I don't know, hundreds, like 300 plus fixes to so far, and we're still finding things to fix. There are a few things we still want to tidy up. So that's another upgradable part of the machine that you can get. You can always download new versions of the kernel ROM. But again, we're trying to keep this grounded in Commodore history. So if we think about the history of Commodore BASIC, it's meant to be in that lineage and inherit a lot of those features and its feel, especially the screen editor. We want the screen editor to feel a lot like the Commodore screen editor, very powerful feature of the Commodore. This is just a quick shot of the quick reference that's in the back of the manual. I won't go over the whole thing, but you can kind of see what's here, especially the graphics commands over there on the side, disk commands, memory management, and the regular basic features of the language. There's some really cool programming tools as well built in. So renumbering lines or auto numbering or listing your program in various ways and like finding your code and editing your code. Lots of really powerful stuff that you may not have seen in previous Commodores. Really useful stuff. Yeah. This is the photo of the user's guide. The user's guide is bundled with the machine. You get a printed user's guide with it. You can see that in the exhibit as well. We actually have way more documentation than just the user guide, though. The user guide has a complete basic reference and how to access all the major features. But we have, I think, are we up to 2,000 pages yet? It's ridiculous. We have a huge amount of documentation, and it's not, I don't even consider it finished. It's not really ready for printing yet. I do want to get it to a point where it's ready to print like the full reference guide for the MEGA65, but as I like to say, the complete documentation for the MEGA65 is a superset of the complete documentation for the Commodore 64, and that's a pretty high bar for brand new documentation for a project like this, all run by volunteers. But it's still in the works. We do want to come up with like something really useful that you can print and keep at your desk that is a full reference. I started talking about BASIC really early on. So I started the digest I announced it in August of 2022, and the first real issue was September of 2022, monthly since then. I had this introduction to basic programming way back in December of 2022, just to like get people started and said, these are the tools you can use. This is how you enter programs. This is some of its capabilities, how you use the built-in editor. We also had somebody who thought, well, that's great that we've got the old Commodore line editor in there, but this is an opportunity to have a nicer experience with a real text editor and some better features. And so this is 11, which is meant to be one more than 10, I guess, that it's actually a transpiler to BASIC 65. So you get a full set of features, including long variable names, and you don't have to worry about line numbers, and you can do labels and other niceties, sort of macro processing and things like that. But what it actually produces is a BASIC 65 program. So it transpiles to BASIC 65. You can distribute it like a BASIC program. It works great. You can also use PetCat. I don't know if anyone here has used PetCat for programming, but a lot of cross development for BASIC goes through this tool. PetCat is included with the VICE emulator. It's part of the VICE project. It can translate between a text file and a BASIC program, or a BASIC program back to a text file if you want to like see the source code in text format. We've worked with the VICE project to add MEGA65 BASIC to PetCat, so you can write programs that way. That's something I cover in the articles. And many modern cross-development tools based on these tool sets also support the MEGA65. CBM PRG Studio and C64 Studio both have MEGA65 support, including like graphics editing and some other things. I wanted to give people a sense of like an excuse to really start in on a project and the tools to do so. Is anyone here familiar with Robot Finds Kitten? Is that something that everyone knows? Nobody knows? Yeah, it's been interesting. I sort of consider it a staple of recreational programming. It's one of these programming projects that people pick up and do, but it's kind of a niche community. It's a really simple idea. It was originally written by Leonard Richardson in 1997 for DOS as just kind of this little text game. It was a submission to the Robot Finds Kitten contest put on by the webzine Nerth Pork, and I don't actually know what that is, but I know that's part of the history of Robot Finds Kitten. Richardson's version took first prize because it was the only entry. It was a small webzine, I think. But now it's sort of taken on a life of its own, and people like to make new versions of it for new platforms. And so there's a catalog of dozens, I don't know how many, but like almost every platform has a version of this. And so I thought it would be a cool idea to make this a project for the community and encourage people to do it. So I wrote an article about, okay, what would you do in BASIC to produce this? It's a pretty simple game. You're a little robot. There's some objects on the screen, and you just move around and you look at each of the objects to see if it's a kitten. And if it's a kitten, you win. But all the other objects on the screen are non-kitten items, NKIs, and you get a little description of what the item is as you approach each one. So there's a lot to go on there that are like relevant topics to game development. There's input, there's graphics, moving things around, there's data that you have to manage, all that kind of thing. So it's a nice way to get started. And I wrote an article all about, well, I'm not going to give you a complete listing, but here are like some ways you can do these basic tasks in BASIC. And you can use these to build your own Robot Finds Kitten. And this is just an example of some of the code in that issue. I also wanted to cover machine language, though. BASIC is a big deal for a lot of people. It's their way into the program. But when I was a kid, machine language was that like vaunted thing. It was the way you get the good games, is you write it in machine language. And when I was 9 years old, I didn't know how to do that, and I didn't have the right resources or tools to do that. So I was always envious of people who could write machine language. And we've got our fancy processor now that's easy to program and really fast and all that. We have some great tools too on how to write machine language code, assembly language code for the MEGA65. I started with this issue, what I wish I knew about machine language, what I wish somebody had told me when I was 9 years old, as kind of a way of introducing the concepts of machine language programming. And so binary and all this other stuff. I go over it pretty quickly because I know that some people that are reading the digest probably have some experience with these ideas, but I wanted to approach it from that childlike perspective that I had. And so, we talk about the different addressing modes and things like that. I remember the Commodore 64 Programmer's Guide. Everyone had one of those. It was this amazing book. Did talk about assembly language, but it made sort of just a passing reference of which tools you need to use it. I think there's like 2 paragraphs on using a machine language monitor that, of course, was not built into the Commodore 64. And so, like, I couldn't get over that. Like, I could see the reference for the instructions, but I didn't know what that meant or how to use it. So, of course, later BASICs, including all the way up to the MEGA65, does have a built-in machine language monitor, so you can get started right away. There are other tools as well. People have written on-device assemblers, including one of my own that I'll mention briefly in a minute. There's some excellent cross-development tools too. So if you want to write a large amount of assembly language, it's good to do that on your PC and then have it copy the program over to your MEGA65 for testing. I, of course, couldn't resist doing a Robot Finds Kitten in machine language as part of the same exercise, right? So in the articles, I give pieces of this is how you do these same tasks in machine language. How do you do input? How do you do character graphics? How do you manage data and things like that? All in assembly language. I actually needed 2 issues to get through all that in assembly language because it's a little more verbose. It's kind of a whirlwind tour of assembly language features and game programming topics to get through that. This was also my opportunity to cover some hardware features that I've really wanted to understand in detail, particularly like timers and interrupts, really important concept, not always obvious. There's some pretty tricky things on how to do that. How do you use these chips, the VIC, the CIA, to do timing in your games and run game loops and things like that, understanding how the raster beam works and how you would use that in a program and why, right? Sprite multiplexing and other features like that, all really important to use. Interrupts, it was really good to finally dig in and understand interrupts all the way thoroughly and have a way of describing that to people. As you can kind of tell, the digest is a selfish opportunity for me to just sort of explore these topics and learn them well enough to teach other people. I'm kind of using that as an opportunity for myself. Similarly, for kernel programming, the ability to use the kernel jump table to access the disk, the vector table to install features into the kernel, or leverage its own interrupt handler, that kind of thing. I try to cover that in other issues as well. Some good code samples, worked tutorials, and things like that that I've always wanted. I do talk a little bit about memory mapping, and memory mapping is a bit of a complex topic in the MEGA65. It's tricky, and I'm not going to go over it in detail here, but I do want to mention it because it's one of these things that it turned out to be necessary to describe interfacing with the kernel, because the ROM is banked into memory in a particular way, and so if you want to have your own code participate with the kernel, then you need to understand the memory map and what it's doing to figure out how to interface in that way. There's actually a full explanation of the memory system in the manual. I was very proud to write that and really get it right, really work on that, and really understand the memory system. Any Crossroads fans in the room? Anyone know this game? This is one of the best games ever published by Computes Gazette. If you haven't seen it, you should look it up. It was one of my favorite things to play. It's a screen full of little tiny creatures that just sort of swarm the place and just murder each other. They're all like shooting and walking around, and you are dropped into the middle of this and have to collect some things and survive. And you can fire your own bullets and things like that. It is cacophonous. It starts out in this huge rush of sound as all these monsters start killing each other, and you have to survive it. Really sort of simply written game with this powerful concept for the Commodore 64, a beautiful thing. And so as part of a way of talking about assembly language programming, I wanted to say, well, what would it be like to tear apart one of these games, maybe this game, and figure out how it works? And so I had 2 issues that I dedicated to disassembly and reverse engineering, using a retro debugger, which is a very popular reverse engineering tool and programming tool for the Commodore 64, and NES and some other things that it supports. You can inspect the character set. You can see all the little creatures are represented in the character set there. And I also talk about Ghidra, which is another tool, really important tool for reverse engineering that does support 6502 assembly language, and is a great way of tearing apart a program and figuring out how it works. I spent a lot of time and multiple issues talking about cross-development because it is such a powerful idea, introducing tools on how to manage lots of source code on your PC as well. I love on-device coding, but if it's any code of any substantial length, I am going to do it on a PC. But we do have some great tools too. Like, people are inventing new stuff. We've got somebody started a fourth. There's a really good Pascal now, the on-device Pascal compiler with editor. Somebody invented their own little just workspace just for cozy programming. That's pretty fun. Lots of stuff you can play with. And there's one of my own on the bottom there. And at some point I did just write my own assembler, and so I have to brag about that a little bit. I took advantage of a built-in feature that I think we added to I think we added this feature where you can just edit text files directly with the line editor in the BASIC. And so I said, great, then you can edit assembly language source code with this built-in line editor. Line editor is not my favorite. Like, I like modern editors, of course, but I've seen lots of people write basic programs that are thousands of lines long, and so I figured, well, this is probably useful to somebody, and this is the way we used to do it on the C64. Many assemblers used a line editor like this as well. So modern syntax, modern features directly for the MEGA65. At some point I designed this mouse pad that has a reference for the assembly language on it. You can get one of these at my exhibit if you want one, this was just fun to do. I wanted to do it as a coffee mug, and I realized I would need multiple coffee mugs to cover all the instructions, so I made it a mouse pad. So real quick, there's a couple of sort of features that I dedicated entire issues to. Of course, the SID chip is a big topic. I did not give it like a complete treatment, but I did want to introduce it. This is like one of my earliest issues to talk about basically what the SID is and how you use it, especially from BASIC, like just enough to learn about the SID to use it from Basic 65. Basic 10 included sound playback, and I think this actually goes back to Basic 7 with a music playback as well. With this play command, you can have these strings of notes, note patterns and whatnot that can make music. And so Basic 10 had a version of that as well. Our version is ever so slightly different, but much more useful. Basically the same feature set, but we can play sound effects and music asynchronously with your basic program. So it can actually be background music and not just like your entire program halts and waits for the music to stop. You can actually start a piece of music and then have your game play while the music is going. We have people in our community that are doing amazing things with the play command and music, especially with the 6 voices or 12 voices. I think it's 6 in the basic. It's 6 voices dedicated to sound effects and 6 to music, but you can use all 12 in various ways. This is just a picture of our sound mixer interface that's sort of built into the MEGA65. I wanted to include this too. This is a little music demo that I wrote, and those data statements are play statements. This is like a Bach prelude or something like that, encoded in play statements. But we also have these digital audio channels for playing sound samples. And this was a fun one. I had this memory of the Justified Ancients of Moo being one of the mod files that I would listen to on my Amiga. And so I made that the topic of a digest issue about these audio channels. The audio channels are actually really easy to program. There's a built-in feature of the CPU to be able to play these audio samples and copy them into the audio channels. And so it was a great opportunity to talk about the basics of sampled sound and just kind of go through the whole thing and really learn it in enough detail to get it to the point where you can write cool programs that can play sound samples, including instructions on how to convert samples using Audacity, which is a PC tool for sound samples, to a format that you can use with the MEGA65. That ends up being a really common theme in development, how to use these common tools on a PC to get data into a format that can work with the MEGA65. And so using Audacity for sound samples is one of those, and I cover that in detail. Graphics is a huge subject on the MEGA65, and I am not going to be able to do it justice here with the time we have left in particular. I'm going to rush through these pretty quickly. Again, see the articles for details if you want, but I have to admit, I'm like 10 articles in on graphics. I haven't even covered the feature set, let alone advanced techniques on how to use it. Like there's so much here. The VIC-2, the original Commodore 64, had 16 fixed colors. Those are all pretty familiar, and 320 by 200 resolution. The VIC-3 introduced 12-bit colors, so 4,096 possible colors in a palette of 256. So you can have 256 possible colors on the screen. Each one of those can be any of 4,096 possible colors in 12-bit. The VIC-4 MEGA65, 23-bit color, so like 8 million possible colors, and 4 256 color palettes. I think it's possible to get all 4 palettes on the screen at the same time if you use both characters and sprites. I'm going to have to double check on that, but I think it is possible to get 1,024 possible colors on the screen at the same time, picked from 8 million choices. And of course, you can adjust the palette dynamically as things are being drawn, so that gives you more features as well. A really popular thing to do, like I was saying about converting data into a MEGA65 format, there is a feature of Basic 65 that just lets you load an IFF file onto the screen. And you can actually save the current bitmap screen as an IFF file as well. So there's loading and saving, like screen capture effectively, of the bitmap graphics features of the Basic. And so a very popular thing for people to do with their MEGA65 is convert files, graphics files, images into IFF format and try to get it to display on the MEGA65. So I have a whole issue about that using ImageMagick for file conversion. And there's like some really tricky stuff in there. So I go into kind of a deep dive on the IFF file format on how to do that. You can draw lines with the Basic. Here's a picture of my cat that I got working for the tutorial. Here's that famous Amiga image of a hamburger that was displayed on a MEGA65 with the camera turned sideways. That kind of thing. I had a cheeky article that I wrote called Let's Paint. And this sort of speaks to my goals of trying to make this interactive and encouraging people to use it. I had like multiple examples of using the basic bitmap graphics system to do really cool and interesting things. And I intentionally pretended to accidentally leave out the screenshots. So this entire article all about graphics programming with no screenshots in it at all, intending to encourage people to actually type in the programs and see what they do. I don't know how successful that was. Maybe it was a huge waste of time to do that, but I'm pretty proud of the examples I came up with, like computer-generated art. There's some examples in there. There's a graphing calculator type-in program you can do, a KidPix-style art toy that I came up with really quickly. You play with that. Probably my biggest mistake on this issue is that this is the thumbnail image for the article. This is big black square. Did not go well on social media. It's like, what are you doing? But I thought it was fun. I also discovered a bug in our trigonometric functions while writing this article, and that was really interesting to say, oh, wait, the cosine function isn't behaving properly. I need to fix that. Sprites, really important idea. The VIC-2 had 8 hardware sprites that were independent of the character graphics background, various modes and features of that. The VIC-3 added no new features to sprites. There's the same 8 hardware sprites in the VIC-2, which is to say that's a little ungenerous because you do have that adjustable color palette. So there are some ways of doing interesting things with sprites in the VIC-3 that are not capable on the VIC-2. But it also had a better basic support for sprites. There's some really cool basic commands on how to use sprites. And of course, we added some more multicolor modes and high-res modes for sprites in the VIC-4. There's kind of a built-in sprite editor, kind of, sort of, on the MEGA65. Or something to do about that. But there's familiar modes and features that I was able to cover in an article. Just fun to review and talk about. Oh yeah, this is what it was like on the Commodore 64. All still applies. This is how you can position sprites on the screen, that kind of thing. Character graphics is actually a bigger subject on the MEGA65, actually bigger than you would expect. That character graphics is kind of how you get to the biggest, most powerful features of the MEGA65 graphics system. I started out easy in a very early article. One of the cool things about Basic 65 is that instead of having to worry about copying PETSCII ROM to RAM and overwriting things and setting things, you can just define characters. You say, okay, screen code 0 is now this. And you've got a little guy that can run around the screen. Really easy to do so, or easy to mention really early on. I ended up being a major subject for lots of articles. I have this whole article on PETSCII and the history of the PETSCII character set, how it appeared in the different models and things like that, why it appears in a particular way on the Commodore 64. Like at some point somebody suggested, like, there are some characters that were really useful in the PET version of PETSCII that were effectively removed for the Commodore 64. Why couldn't we just add them back for the MEGA65? And so I have some discussion about that, including some code on how to use that char-def statement to get those characters back, using print and CHR $ and stuff to get them onto the screen. Our graphics modes include a 40 by 25 text mode, an 80 by 25 text mode, so 80 column text, and you can even go 80 by 50, so you can go 640 by 400. And one of the things you can do with the 640 by 400 is use an 80 by 25 text mode with higher resolution characters. So these are actually characters that are 16 high and 8 wide, which allows you to use PC fonts. There are lots of PC fonts that are 16 by 8, and so there's a way to do that. A little sacrilegious, but it's kind of fun to see that in practice. I have a short issue on how to do that and a download. This year, I've started a new series that I really want to plow all the way to the end of the character graphics feature set. And so I started with this, really talking about character graphics and screen memory and color memory and how you would use these features to do graphics. The memory pointers and stuff. One of the cool things about the VIC-4 is that you can actually pick the start of screen memory and color memory at any address at a byte level resolution. So instead of like picking banks and sort of putting things in a few fixed places, you can just point that pointer anywhere you want, and it'll treat the rest of that as screen memory. Powerful for certain techniques and also just for double buffering and all kinds of other stuff you might do. I started to get into color in a more recent issue. So there's the familiar VIC-2 color modes, extended background color, low-res multicolor, and these modes have new possibilities on the MEGA65 because of its palette and other things that it can do. What I am going to get to later this year, I'm writing the next issue on super extended attribute mode. Like a lot of the Commodore 64 graphics modes trade some features for other features because they want to use everything in the same amount of memory. And the MEGA65 says, well, we have more memory. Why don't we just have a mode or a set of modes that just say, oh, I want to use more memory for my screen and color stuff. And so what can we do with more memory? And this gets you all the way to Full color resolution, full color, full resolution bitmap graphics, like not bitplane anymore, but bitmap graphics, with like character level tiles and so forth. You can do all kinds of things. We have a really powerful feature called the raster rewrite buffer, very complicated, that will get you a layering effect, so you can put basically graphics objects and that you can blit and move around and all this other stuff. That's how you really get to the advanced stuff. And I'm looking forward to getting the digest to that point to be able to describe how those things work. But other people have already written articles on this, so I don't want to like say that you have to wait for me to say it. There's some great resources out there on how to do some of these things in your programs. I cover a whole bunch of things in the digest outside of this. The MEGA65 project updates. Whenever we do a firmware update, I talk about that in the digest as well, so you know when to download new things. Various hardware projects people are doing. We can talk about the Mega phone at some point. You can reach me at my exhibit if you want to know more about that. I always take photos when I'm at shows like this, and I post them in the digest to sort of share those out. I did a community survey back in 2023 that was really useful. I might do that again at some point, so be sure to subscribe, or at least keep an ear out for when we do another community survey. It's good to get information about people that don't yet own a MEGA65 and just get to know what you're interested in. I most recently did a historical overview of the project, the MEGA65, the first 10 years. Email, RSS. I do the Audio Read Aloud podcast, and we are now syndicating in Computes Gazette. If you have not yet heard, there is a revival of the Computes Gazette magazine. You can subscribe to in print or in digital. I've got an issue at my table if you want to look at it. And there's a MEGA65 column in there where we're syndicating digest feature articles for things like that. If you want to know more about the MEGA65, please visit me at the exhibit. This is the URL where you can subscribe to the digest. If you want one, buy one. Talk to me on details on how to get one. And thanks very much.